Hey, it's Lou, and here's the thing. One of the most common crimes in America has recently been destigmatized. I'm talking about the use of marijuana. As of May 2019, 33 states have legalized the medical consumption of marijuana, and 10 states allow some form of recreational use. Washington, D.C. allows both. This new attitude has emerged as the country grapples with the troubling legacy of the war on drugs. Cannabis alone led to tens of millions of arrests. Granted, experts tell me that only a small fraction of marijuana arrests lead to jail time, but so-called collateral consequences can shadow offenders for the rest of their lives. That is, convicts might be legally excluded from certain jobs, certain public benefits, and things like student loans and voting. Now, the marijuana legalization effort will undoubtedly spare millions of users from the disruptive impact of arrests and convictions. But the question remains, what about all the people who've already been arrested for marijuana crimes in jurisdictions that now permit it? Should they be extended what legal scholars call retroactive ameliorative relief? In other words, should their criminal records be wiped away? In 1971, Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs.
America's public enemy number one is drug abuse.
Nearly 5 decades later, the U.S. has the highest drug overdose death rate among wealthy nations, according to a study out of the University of Southern California. Drug abuse, particularly opioid abuse, is such a dire problem in modern America that the CDC says it's one of the main reasons life expectancy is on the decline. That's a disturbing trend that defies advances in medicine. It's also part of a growing body of evidence that the war on drugs has failed to eradicate the problem it targeted, despite the fact that it has expended considerable resources and derailed millions of lives. According to estimates in a 2013 study from the ACLU, the initiative has cost $1 trillion and resulted in 40 million arrests over the preceding 4 decades. It's one of the main reasons the U.S. has the highest incarceration rate in the world. In fact, nearly 30% of all Americans have a criminal record. Communities of color have been disproportionately impacted. Consider, census figures show that African Americans make up 13.4% of the U.S. population, but the Federal Bureau of Prisons reports that 37.6% of inmates are black. And while that ACLU report asserts that blacks and whites use marijuana at roughly the same rate, blacks are 3.73 times more likely than whites to be arrested for marijuana. This inequality shouldn't come as a surprise given the implicit goal of Nixon's anti-drug crusade. In a stunning moment of candor, John Ehrlichman, a senior Nixon aide, explained in a 1994 interview, quote, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." In short, the war on drugs has been expensive, ineffective, and has exacerbated racial inequality. So, a national conversation has recently emerged regarding law enforcement's approach to drug use. And one of the main threads in this conversation is the legalization of marijuana. While the drug remains prohibited on the federal level, the legalization movement has gained significant momentum within individual states. Yet, for people who've already been convicted of marijuana offenses in states where the drug is now permitted, that may feel like too little, too late. Keep in mind, it's not just court appearances, fines, or jail time that make up their punishment. It's also these collateral consequences, which are codified into state and federal laws and can follow a person around forever. Douglas Berman, a professor at Ohio State University's Moritz College of Law, told me it's hard to identify one single aspect of life that isn't impacted by collateral consequences. Everything from getting loans and credit cards, to attaining certain parental rights, to being allowed to serve in the armed forces. The restrictions vary from state to state, but they are expansive. The NICCC catalogs over 44,000 of these so-called invisible punishments. Margaret Love, a lawyer specializing in executive clemency and restoration of rights, told me the most common have to do with attaining licenses to get certain jobs. In New Hampshire, for example, those with a drug conviction can't become a midwife. In Pennsylvania, it's milk sanitation inspection. In South Carolina, your dry cleaning license can be revoked if you commit a misdemeanor. All told, 30% of the U.S. workforce is required to have some form of occupational licensing, according to the Brookings Institution. Meanwhile, Beverly Yun Thompson, an associate professor of sociology at Siena College, told me that a particularly egregious collateral consequence restricts those who committed a marijuana crime from participating in the legal marijuana business, as is the case in a number of states. Thompson said for decades, we associated the marijuana trade with black and brown people, and we punished them for it. But now that it's legal in places across the country and a legitimate money-making enterprise, we're telling those ex-convicts that they can't share in the profits. Thompson told me when America wanted to demonize weed, black men were the face of the drug. But now that cannabis is no longer scary, those black men are being pushed aside, and according to Thompson, white girls doing yoga are the new face of the industry. Berman told me this type of exclusion makes those caught up in the justice system more likely to engage in criminal activity. Love told me that collateral consequences are essentially a way to legally discriminate against people who had run-ins with the law, and it prevents reintegration into society. Robert Michos, a professor at Vanderbilt Law School, told me that when state lawmakers began legalizing marijuana about 2 decades ago, these issues didn't really resonate with them. Because ex-cons aren't a powerful political constituency, collateral consequences weren't on anyone's radar. But now, Michos told me, the attitude is, if pro-marijuana laws are designed to prevent future injustices, then we ought to pass laws that clean up the injustices of the past. This is the aim of retroactive ameliorative relief. Berman told me the basic concept behind this legal principle is that people should not continue to bear any enduring scarlet letter for engaging in what citizens have decided is now socially acceptable conduct. Therefore, a movement has emerged to wipe away or expunge marijuana convictions that can trigger all those damaging collateral consequences I talked about. Presidential contender Cory Booker recently reintroduced a bill that would not only decriminalize marijuana on the federal level, but also offer retroactive ameliorative relief to those that have already been arrested. California's Prop 64, passed in 2016, has a similar provision. Now, there are definitely some legitimate objections to retroactive ameliorative relief for marijuana offenses or otherwise. For instance, as a potential employer, I might want to know if a job applicant has a criminal record, but if it's expunged, I can't. I told Thompson, the sociologist, that a parent might want to know if their kid's nanny is a pothead, for instance. Thompson countered, criminal records don't tell you who uses drugs, they tell you who got caught using drugs. Fair enough. But Michos raised another potential objection to retroactive ameliorative relief. From a philosophical standpoint, Michos told me, one might argue if you broke the law, it doesn't matter that it has since changed. Your willingness to break society's rules says something about you, and you should face the consequences. But Paul Larkin, a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, told me the people in question already did face consequences. Continuing to punish them is unnecessary. Furthermore, there is compelling proof that expungements benefit society. According to a study out of the University of Michigan, those who obtain an expungement have extremely low subsequent crime rates and experience a sharp upturn in their wage and employment trajectories. Unfortunately, however, not many people pursue expungements. That same study found that among those legally eligible for marijuana crimes or otherwise, just 6.5% obtain it within 5 years of eligibility. Berman told me that obtaining an expungement is often expensive, confusing, and time-consuming. It might require someone without a ton of income to hire a lawyer. Consider New Jersey, where the governor has promised not only to legalize marijuana, but also to remove the stain of low-level drug offenses from his constituents' records. In a recent article, NewJersey.com outlined the head-spinning process of getting an expungement in the Garden State. First, you have to get fingerprinted to obtain your record. Then, you have to petition the state Supreme Court. You then have to mail a copy of your petition and criminal record to 7 different law enforcement agencies. Then you get a hearing. If the court rules in your favor, you then have to notify up to 12 more agencies. This whole process costs hundreds in fees, according to NewJersey.com, not to mention the expense of a lawyer if you need help navigating all of it. The city of San Francisco had a similar problem. A spokesperson from the San Francisco DA's office told me in the wake of Prop 64, only 23 people came forward to have their records cleared. So, the DA's office tried to take a proactive approach and search for expungible records themselves. When it turned out that required a ton of time and resources, the DA sought a technological solution. Enter into this scene Code for America. The nonprofit developed an algorithm that identified 8,132 records eligible for expungement in a matter of minutes. A judge expunged all of them with the stroke of a pen. A Code for America spokesperson told me they also helped dismiss or reduce approximately 5,300 records in Sacramento County, and their goal is to help clear 250,000 convictions across the country in 2019. Michaels told me this initiative, as well as retroactive ameliorative relief initiatives across the country, are all part of a broader trend. Americans are rethinking mass incarceration and how we handle crime and punishment in general. Michaels pointed to the Florida referendum in 2018 that gave ex-felons the right to vote. Meanwhile, in 2018, 61 laws were passed across the country to reduce collateral consequences, according to the CCRC. Love added that in a time of deep partisanship, the fight to eliminate collateral consequences is largely a bipartisan effort. Liberals like the social justice component, she told me, while conservatives value a redemption story and want to eliminate the regulations that prevent the free market from hiring those with a criminal record. Love added that we all do stupid things, but stupidity shouldn't be terminal. And the other thing to keep in mind is that a 2017 poll found that most Americans have tried marijuana, so it feels unfair that those of us who were caught have to bear the consequences for a lifetime. And now that it's a legal industry in some states, it's a strange situation that some people are punished while others are profiting from the same behavior. Okay, I'm gonna go live my life.